Well, actually, before we get into the cabinet appointments, what is your view on the potential delay to that financial statement on October the 31st? I mean, clearly, Rishi Sunak has only just got his feet under the desk, but he presumably knows what's been going on. Should they go ahead on Monday?
I'm both surprised and alarmed to hear James Cleverly saying that, because we've been waiting on these forecasts, in particular from the Office for Budget Responsibility, for a very long time. We don't yet fully know the scale of the damage that the Conservatives have caused to our economy. You know, when they crashed it, when we've seen all this chaos. And we do need to see those forecasts, and we'll only see those forecasts when they press ahead with this statement. So I think we do need to see it as soon as possible. But this is just this never-ending chaos that we see at the heart of government. Big decisions not being taken, and it creates massive problems for our country, because it becomes all about the Conservative Party when we face such big challenges as a country that are just not being addressed.
Would you not concede, though, that at least on the basis of the speech that Rishi Sunak gave before entering number 10 yesterday, that it does feel like we are in a slightly different area of Conservative governments, that perhaps some of the adults has finally got their hands back on the steering wheel?
I'm afraid I don't feel it that way. And, you know, Rishi Sunak stood in front of Downing Street and said that he was going to bring integrity back to his government. And then he appoints Suella Braverman back as Home Secretary, someone who just last week broke the ministerial code, an issue of national security. And, you know, clearly he struck some kind of grubby deal with her to bring her back with a promise of her support. But again, this is all about the Conservative Party. This has been going on for months now, and that's why I think it's only right that the British people get the chance to have their say. This should be about them, not unifying the Conservative Party. I
mean, Suella Braverman, James Cleverly and indeed Rishi Sunak would all presumably say, look, she made a mistake and she apologised for it, a mistake similar to the one, you know, that David Lammy made, well, 16 times when he failed to register 16 interests on the Register of Members' Interests, including payments for tickets to boxing matches. I mean, you know, he's still in his post. So why shouldn't Suella Braverman, in arguably a more important position than the shadow Foreign Secretary, why shouldn't she?
I think it is hard to compare the two examples that you've just given there, but we don't actually know the full extent of what's gone on here. You know, we haven't had questions answered around, was this the only occasion in which Suella Braverman conducted this kind of government business on a personal email account, sharing sensitive documents? She refuses to answer these questions. We haven't had straight answers on it. And so I think, you know, unless we get to that point, we don't know if this is the only occasion in which she's done it. But we know that, you know, she's the Home Secretary, responsible for issues of national security, responsible for keeping us all safe, for our police. And she behaves like this. And for Rishi Sunak to say this is integrity in government, well, I think that really is hard to stand up.
The one thing that I haven't heard you mention yet this morning, and frankly I couldn't stop Labour figures from shouting about it, opposition figures I should say, from shouting about it yesterday, is the prospect of an early general election. I mean, is that still Labour's ambition, to somehow force the government into a position where they have to take this to the electorate? You
know, we've had 3 Conservative Prime Ministers now in 3 months, and it really is getting ridiculous. I do think the British people deserve to have their say in a general election. They've not had a look in. Conservative MPs, they've had 2 opportunities now to choose the Prime Minister. True. The British people, they haven't. And wherever I go, people say to me, they want the chance to have their say.
There isn't anything constitutionally improper about it. So I wonder just how you might get there, because I can't see a way.
It's hard for us, absolutely. We don't have a majority in Parliament, but it won't stop us saying that it's a necessity, because this isn't going to end. This is not going to stop this chaos. And we do face real and pressing challenges as a country, whether it's on the cost of living, around creating new great jobs, around skills, around childcare. There's so much that we need to change in our country, and we're only going to see that change with a Labour government.
What should we expect to see from Sir Keir Starmer then at the dispatch box at PMQs today? I mean, will he go after Mr Sunak's admittedly pretty substantial personal wealth at the time of a cost of living crisis?
I'm most interested in Rishi Sunak's record, and of course he was Chancellor for a prolonged period of time. And I think you look at his record as Chancellor, someone who said where it comes to supporting our children coming out of the pandemic, that he'd maxed out on the support that was available to them. He presided over industrial scale fraud and waste. He refused to try and make efforts to get that money back. Terrible value for the taxpayer. Dodgy contracts going out to friends and donors of the Conservative Party, and now he has the brass neck to come and lecture us all on tough choices. There's one really easy area, of course, where he could raise some extra money, and that's by following our call to end the tax breaks that private schools enjoy. I think that's a really easy and straightforward choice. If he tells us there are tough choices to make, get on and do that. £1.7 billion we could push into state education.
Well, just on your brief then for a second, and as we edge ever closer, I mean, you'll have noticed coming into the building today, things are definitely getting a little bit colder. COVID will, of course, be a concern in the latter part of this year. How are our schools prepared for the next winter wave of COVID, which we will have to have year after year for some time yet?
I think because of so much of the delay and inability to make decisions at the heart of government, we haven't actually been planning in the way that we ought to for some of this. So we haven't properly considered the role for ventilation in our schools. That applies in the winter as much as it does in the summer. And the government haven't published the research that we need to see in making those kinds of decisions. But our schools and our staff and teachers and school support staff are under enormous pressure right now. I mean, not just the pressures of COVID, but, you know, when I visit schools, I hear about children arriving at school not having been fed, you know, the pressures on family budgets. I think, you know, that's why I've said that we should deliver breakfast clubs for every primary school child in England. And we pay for that by ending the non-dom tax status. Again, another area where the government could and should act to make a difference.
I mean, so when Rishi Sunak yesterday promised outside Number 10 that we would be seeing improvements to education, improvements to our schools, I mean, in your mind, can that be achieved without real-term spending increases?
I think our schools are facing a really difficult couple of years ahead. I mean, I would say the only reason that we're actually even thinking about these kinds of spending cuts to our public services is because the Conservatives crashed the economy. We wouldn't have been having this conversation about the cuts that we would have been making.
They made it worse. They did make it worse, admittedly, but it's not entirely of their...
Well, they haven't invested in education properly for the last 12 years, absolutely. We haven't seen the kinds of investment that is needed because we know that if we invest in our children and young people, we invest in the future of our country. But I think where it comes to adult learning as well, we face a real challenge on climate change, but actually a great opportunity to provide well-paid, highly skilled jobs across our country. But we have to have a skilled workforce that can retrain and upskill throughout their lives too. And that's what we're talking about today with the launch of David Blunkett's report for the Labour Party.
It will be a very, very interesting edition of PMQs anyway, I'm sure. Bridget Phillipson, lovely to see you. Thanks for being with us.